for so many actresses, it's dehumanizing to be put in that box and to be objectified. It hurts. It
It
hurts, and
does.
people have to see it hurt because we need to reclaim our humanity around that.
Welcome to Women We Should Know with international speaker, mindset reset mentor, author, and your host, Leslie Michaels. With audacious honesty and candor, the Women We Should Know podcast presents the wisdom and life-empowering insights of women who are the embodiments of innovation and social evolution. Please join Leslie as she shares potent conversations that will inspire your personal and professional evolutions.
Well, welcome back. I'm so pleased to have you with us today. Women We Should Know was founded on the understanding that there are so many females who are out in the world who we don't know their names. We don't know their stories. And yet they are doing amazing things. They are an inspiration, and they are actually changing the narrative in a way that is broadly impactful, but maybe we don't know that they are part of the impetus behind that. And so, based partly, if I'm to be completely honest, on my personal desire to be able to have conversations with all these wonderful women, and then based partly on the opportunity to bring those voices to you, we created this particular platform. And we have just the type of woman today that I am speaking about. Jenna Ciralli, I get to say her name a little bit slowly, was born in Bozeman and raised in Great Falls, Montana. She received her BA in theater arts, acting with honors from Willamette University in Salem, Oregon, where she was nominated for an Irene Ryan Award for her performance as Liz Morden in Timberlake Wurtenberger's, that was a tough one, Our Country's Good. Jenna moved to New York City in 2006. Now, that's a big move for anyone. And she trained at the prestigious William Esper Studio under Terry Knickerbocker. And she talks about how this built her backbone. I am really excited to understand what that actually means. Wanting to be part of the New York City method acting, the Meisner technique, she founded two New York City-based theater companies. Velma Sparrow in Leonard Melfi's Birdbath, and having Edward, the famed Edward Albee, in the audience for Israel Horowitz's One Acts at the Flea in downtown Manhattan were two of Jenna's big highlights in New York. In 2019, she moved back to Montana with her husband, Jeff, after her award-winning short film, Willow Creek Road, toured the film festival circuit and, by the way, received 2.4 million views in 1 week. That's Willow Creek Road. You're going to want to Google that. She is the creator and lead actor of two Big Sky Giant recipient grants, and her upcoming homestead focuses on revisiting the Western landscape through the interior feminine gaze. How often have we seen that? Never. She recently wrapped the feature The New Frontier as one of 3 female leads. And Jenna is also a 2017 Webby Award honoree for that very Oh, no, this is a different one. Okay, I'll take that little part. I'll have to edit out. Jenna is also a 2017 Webby Award honoree for the viral video casting call, The Project. Oh, that's the one that had 2.4 million. Okay, well, we'll just do some editing magic here. Let me start over again. Jenna is also a 2017 Webby Award honoree for the viral video casting call, The Project. When we say viral video, that is because This film received 2.4 million views in 1 week. You're definitely going to want to Google that one. She is presently writing a TV series entitled Searchers with writing partner Kate Britton. This is a busy woman who is really pushing the narrative about women in arenas where they have typically not been featured or where their important stories have not been heard. So it is my great pleasure to be able to bring to you Jenna Ciralli today. Hi, Jenna.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you so much for having me. That was such a nice intro. I feel so seen.
Well, and you should be. You are out there really doing some amazing things, and I want to discuss all of those. But before we get started, one fun thing I like to do is ask my guests, what is one thing you would love people to know or understand about you that is not in your bio?
Just that I was such a shy, terrified girl. And the reason why fast forward to this conversation today exists is because I challenged myself as a 12-year-old to take or 13-year-old to take a drama class in high school to face this terror that I felt. And leaning into the terror, which was very juicy, there was a lot of feeling there, has only brought abundance. Who knew?
Who knew? Who
Yeah.
knew?
Yeah.
And whether you're 12 or 13 or 35 or 63, leaning into the terror is something I'm always encouraging women to do. So congratulations to you for being so bold from the onset. What a young age to have that kind of courage. That is really inspiring.
Thank you.
So there are so many things I want to speak about. I'd like to start with this comment that you made about how moving to New York, moving through your studies at the William Esper Studio, how that helped you to build your backbone. And let's overlay that on the story of your shy and timid 13-year-old self.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great expansion upon what we foundationally already brought to the conversation. Yeah, so the 2-year program, the Meisner technique, is all about working inside out. So you're using a lot of your own demons and passions and yearning and all your human stuff that makes me a unique Jenna, makes you a unique Leslie. We have, it's called a thematic chord in actor speak, and what plays upon you plays differently upon me. For example, injustice versus betrayal versus abandonment. These are all really hot buttons that bring us to life as actors. So by, again, diving into that deep study of self, that allowed me to feel so seen and take up so much space in a way that as a shy person, I was kind of protecting for many years. And as a woman, honestly, growing up in Montana, it was very much a boys' club. And I was never interested in dating really or being like the cool girl. I had so much to say artistically. And that wasn't really, I mean, sports kind of reigned supreme here. And we had beautiful, like, warrior female athletes that just, I was in awe of, but I was kind of a sensitive, flower in many ways. And also not, the kind of steely vulnerability that comes within was kind of what I was interested in. But to take up space in New York City, which was very intimidating for a gal from Montana, and to have a wonderful teacher in Terry Knickerbocker guide us through a 2-year program where we're examining all this stuff that I'm talking about, I felt so seen and so validated, and that really made my feet feel like they were on the ground. And there wasn't a sense of competition, because what he did is he saw each person's thematic chord, each person's unique humanity, and guided you in that direction. So you were only in competition with yourself and your ability to access it. So I kind of fell in love with my class, all these different characters with all these different quirks. And was given so much visibility to be seen in a way that I felt invisible prior. So that gave me a backbone. And then also New York is just really tough, you know, pounding pavement day after day, the grid, being rent poor. You know, I think I made my rent in 3 weeks, which is not the way you really want to live. But I was on work study. So I would literally scrub, you know what, off of toilets and do the dirty work to pay my tuition for class, which was kind of romantic to be in a New York studio doing work study in your mid-20s. That was kind of wonderful at the time. And I worked 12-hour days nannying before I would go to class at night. And I worked really, really hard. And the pileup of that lifestyle day in, day out, that definitely gave me a backbone, whether I liked it or not. It's hard.
It would.
Yeah.
And, oh gosh, you just touched on so many things that I want to speak to. First of all, this idea of Steely vulnerability. I love that term. What does that mean for you?
I think it's to be unapologetic about, as a woman, we're apologizing all the time. And
Oh God, it's
it's just awful.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my move to Montana was unapologetic. That was not the thing that I was supposed to do as an actor.
Mhm.
And it gave me a ferocity to just say, accept, you know, how scary that is, how to lean into being, not doing the right thing again as a woman, like
Right.
cross your T's, dot your I's, be a good girl. And when you're unapologetic and you trailblaze, that brings up inevitably so much vulnerability. But it's a steely vulnerability because I think you're comforted by your convictions in a way that no dad can't give you, society can't give you. Like only
Right.
you can do that to yourself.
Right. And I know you spoke in a other previous conversation about how that experience of moving from New York, the risk of moving from New York,
Mhm.
and yet there was a risk of not moving from New York.
Yeah, that's really profound. I'm gonna take that in for a second. Yeah. Well, we were comfortable there, but we couldn't expand. And we could only afford a 1-bedroom apartment with what we had. And in Montana, we could afford a house.
Mhm.
So that was so scary to be willing to expand and literally take up more space, and kind of be more of an adult and a homeowner. You know, that's like
Mhm.
that's a very big step in one's life.
It is.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, it is potentially the largest purchase most people will make.
yes, and I didn't know that until I had experienced it as a 37-year-old. You just don't know till you're kind of thrust into it. It changes you, just like, you know, other markers and milestones in your life do. But when you have your own space, then you have access to your creativity and to compartmentalize that. Like you were saying earlier, you have your place where you sleep and your place where you work. And
Yes.
you can go into these different rooms. And again, I think this is very feminine because, you know, we're multitaskers. We carry so many different compartments within, you know, our ability to function for the world and take care of others and do everything that we have to do. So to have all these different rooms to access different parts of myself, I started to notice when I auditioned, my auditions were better when I went on take for film because I was grounded. And like my voice dropped in. My friends were saying your voice was in much higher register in New York. And when you moved into Montana, all of a sudden you had kind of this belly voice. And I thought that was very interesting. And they started to respond to an authenticity that they saw in me that was grounded due to being in more of my authentic element, which you may relate to in New Mexico and having access to nature, you know,
Yes.
down there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And like New Mexico, I understand that Montana, particularly your part of Montana,
Mhm.
has a really blossoming and vibrant film community.
Yes, it is blowing up here, for lack of a better word. There's the Yellowstone Film Ranch, which is a Western town
Mhm.
built like a little mini Hollywood over behind Chico Hot Springs in the Paradise Valley. And we just filmed the first feature there by their production team, and there'll be many more to follow.
Mhm.
That's a big change here, but also due to COVID and due to many things, a lot of people are coming back through to shoot their Western. The Western we talked about is also kind of having a moment within the Montana scene, whether it's a modern day Western or a period piece proper. It's
Mhm.
having a moment. And I think yeah, it's largely due to two things in my mind. One, I think a lot of our white male celebrity kind of cowboy types are coming out to Montana because I think there's more BIPOC representation in LA and New York City right now. And that
Mhm.
those narratives are kind of coming up on the coast. And I think that's pushing, that narrative, which still has its place out to the West proper. And I also think people are going back to nature at this time. They're leaving the cities and really finding those simple joys and the quality of life of living more with nature and interacting more. And I think that that affects the genre and people wanting to come back to Montana as well because
Right. Right.
it's so beautiful here.
And I know you personally have a very strong commitment to allyship
Mhm.
with the BIPOC community of the West.
Yes, I care greatly about that. I'm still learning. I make a lot of mistakes. I have to lean into the awkwardness of my whiteness and my privilege all the
Yes.
time. And writing this TV series, Searchers, my partner Kate and I are examining a female friendship as extras on the sets of all these different westerns, and we're examining tropes of like the stoic Native American maiden who doesn't say anything but saves the white man, or the medicine man just there to save the white man, or the
Right.
token black man. All these different tropes, and it's tricky. And as two white women, to lean into that, we couldn't figure it out until we had this wonderful friend of ours in Missoula named Kendra Potter, who is Native American, say you need to lean into your awkwardness and your white experience and how you're kind of having foibles on set, and then that will help as kind of a true north star through the series. And so that's where we're at right now. And it's a comedy. I think the comedy genre can also help with that. People can kind of laugh at us and with us.
Exactly. Exactly. And that makes perfect sense to me. Perfect sense. A woman I'm in communicative relationship with around my own evolving awareness of how to use my privilege for the benefit of those who don't possess it. Said
Yeah.
something similar to me one day. She just said, Leslie, just talk about your privilege. Let it be out there. Be able to say, look, I come from a privileged place. I
Yeah.
get that, but I don't want to misuse it. And the more you can say that in multicultural environments, the more people will understand where you're coming from and be willing to help guide you.
Yeah. Again, it's that Steely vulnerability, right? Like if you lead from a place of vulnerability, there's an inherent honesty to that and a willingness to change and
Yes.
to evolve. And I think without that, like people get very defensive and there's lots of armor and wherever they're at is fine in their own process. But I think the movement comes from that vulnerability that we're talking about.
And I find that women are simultaneously more comfortable and more resistant to that vulnerability, more comfortable because it is inherent to our natural feeling center, but also resistant in the way that it has placed us collectively in a position of being taken advantage of. And so it's this scale that we are continuously trying to balance, don't you find?
Oh, that's so well said. That helped. I just kind of understood myself a little better while you were talking. Yeah, you have to kind of honor the tension of the opposites, right?
Right.
Yeah, they are both there because there's an inherent protective quality from going to certain places. Oh, this old act again, gotta be the one being vulnerable and
Right.
being open. No, I don't want to do all that work sometimes. I want people to meet me halfway. Yeah, you have to learn those personal boundaries and to pick and choose your battles with that.
That's right.
That's a life of learning that.
That's right. That's right. And because you are conscious of this particular journey that some of us as privileged white women are eagerly and tentatively taking, again, the balance of the tension. This is something that you are bringing to your characters and letting play out within your characters. I know you said that what drives the WCR character is the yearning and the longing. And can you speak to that?
Oh, I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. It makes me kind of teary just leaning into that because I've always connected so much to yearning. I'm a very passionate person. It is a double-edged sword. I wake up every day with a tremendous amount of hunger to connect, to communicate like we are today, to be seen. And much like this character in Willow Creek Road, she is a very lone person who wants to connect. And I think in a way the kids are more of a metaphor than maybe on the nose in terms of the woman, her inner life, because they represent play and connectivity, of course, and presence. And yeah, I really feel like it's the root of that child's play to get back to that in herself that the character's trying to find. So it's a longing for being present and having play for that particular character. But I think in every character that I take on, I'm always aware of that piece as a passionate person myself. I can't pull a character down to my passion as Jenna, but I can go up to whatever they're striving for to tell the story. Because everybody has that.
I love that description. I love that description because isn't that what we as women all do, whether it is as an actor or whether it is as an ally to a marginalized community, or whether it is to that next project that we are terrified to do, but know we must.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of pulling it down to us, but us ascending to that next space and discovering more of ourselves in the process.
Absolutely. And therein is the collaboration and the discovery. And like we just spoke about, it's not always readily at your fingertips. That's
right.
My therapist in New York said, if you didn't have an ego, you couldn't walk across the street.
Right.
There for a reason. So again, we're working with, and as women, we kind of understand the tension of two different things. We're working with those opposites. But
exactly.
Yeah, I go up to story. That's where all the energy is, and where all the juices.
Right. Well, it's my personal hypothesis that tendency for those of us who do stretch to reach that next level of passion, to discover that part of ourselves that we haven't discovered, that is an essential element that is going to help us lead and going to help us change the dynamic in the way all people are treated in this world, bring a new level of humanity.
It's infectious, isn't it? When you see someone vibrating with passion, you want to
Isn't it? I know. You want to eat from that cake.
Oh, you do. It's the best recruitment tool.
I know you are having are experiencing great satisfaction with making these films about the West and bringing women in and giving them voice where they haven't had voice, giving them a space where they are seen, they are the lead. It is about them and their journey. But at the same time, I know that you are also still in that space of playing characters representing women within white male dominated film. And how does this juxtapose for you?
Well, I've been playing a lot of featured whores, which a lot of Westerns are kind of either the whore or the teacher. Again, kind of the good girl or the bad girl. There's a lot of that version whore complex. And that's, its own story. And honestly,
but isn't that, I'm going to interrupt you,
Yeah.
I find that fascinating in film in general, but particularly in the Western film, that they play women, write women, present women as so one-dimensional.
Yeah.
You are the good girl or the bad girl.
Yeah.
You are the savior or the whore. There is no multi-dimensionality to the women in
Absolutely.
these roles.
Yeah, and actually we're writing an episode in Searchers called Dolly after exploring Hooker with a heart of gold, that archetype, and Dolly Parton is kind of, our archetypal energy, who's amazing.
Right.
Yeah, so we named it Dolly, and we have this scene where she's taken upstairs and is comforting the outlaw who has, a bloodied face and has been, in a shootout. And every time she goes to speak, he cuts her off. So there's just mansplaining throughout. He's telling her how she understands him, and she's like his best friend, but his wife is cold and frigid, and she can't understand
that old story.
Yeah, so we're exploring the limitations within the attempts, I think, to make a dynamic woman like this. She's a bad woman, but she's got a heart of gold. That's very funny to me, and we've all seen that kind of play out. And then how much power does she really have? She kind of gets left, and I mean, there's much to explore. I can't speak wholly to that archetype because I'm still learning it myself. But
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
I look forward to seeing this come out and be released. This will be incredible. I want to speak about Casting Call. Or more to the point, I want you to speak about Casting Call. Where did you find the genesis of this? Where did it speak to you? And in that way, I suspect we'll learn why it spoke to 2.4 million viewers within the course of 1 week after its release.
That was such a surprise and so unexpected. I don't even know if I could speak to that. I think we're all still a little shell-shocked by that, but I can talk about the seed of it and where that began. And that was 3 friends coming out of the William Esper studio, the training that I talked about earlier. We had all studied with Terry Knickerbocker and had a common language around our training, a common vulnerability. And we were out there experiencing these very lowbrow casting calls that were limiting, these limited tropes that we're talking about, and felt like we had so much more to offer in terms of our complexity. And I always liken it to, I have a thoroughbreds race in me as an actor, and I don't just want to do a fast sprint. That's one speed. I have so many different speeds within me to explore and to express. So we deliberately I think it was the spirit of play again that we talked about earlier. And it was a lot of fun. We deliberately chose lowbrow casting call breakdowns to kind of drive the point home. So we didn't choose the best of the best. We chose the ones that said, you know, they need a small, slight frame because performance space is limited.
Ugh.
Or mine was, she loves being a woman, so she probably wears a push-up bra, which is, you know, speaks to like the bra burning days. You're more familiar with than I am. So I thought that was interesting. The bra kind of as the
Right.
And then we wanted women to feel seen and to give them nonverbal reactions to how these casting calls made them feel. So you see some women cry, you see some women just like can't even deal with it, just smirk. You see laughter, you see a range of emotions, a lot of kind of angry eyes and eye rolling and things like that. So there's two things going on. The audience can hear the limiting breakdowns, and they can also see the human and how that makes the human feel. And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, for so many actresses, it's dehumanizing to be put in that box and to be objectified. It hurts. It hurts that people have to see it hurt because we need to reclaim our humanity around that. So we also had an amazing editor, Julie Azrian, who's incredibly talented. And I think the video popped through her ability to really understand how to pace it and make it entertaining in a way, and then to give it bite, you know.
Yes.
Through, and then
yes,
also,
I heard from a friend of mine in the industry several times. She would say, the power of film lays on the editing room floor.
That's so true. It's born. A film is born initially in the writing. It's born again differently in production. Born again a third time in the editing room, and then born to the audience as a fourth stage. And it changes every single time. That's so true.
I know that there has been much conversation. We all know about Harvey and his life in prison. There's been a lot of conversation for many, many years. It's just heightened and become more bold and pointed in the last few years about the casting call and how women are treated in that industry. But I can see, as you describe this film, why it speaks to so many women, because it is something that women from all walks of life have experienced, whether it's for that big promotion or whether it's for that significant opportunity. This is a place and a way in which women have been marginalized since the beginning of time. And so I can certainly see why the 2.4 million views, and I'm sure that many of our listeners are going to check it out now and watch and have a remembrance in their mind, either their own story or the story of their sister or the story of their friend, of this this experience of being marginalized, of being reduced and being dehumanized.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking while you were talking that I don't think Weinstein would have been brought down in the way that he was if it wasn't during the Trump era, because I think everyone was starved for accountability.
Yes.
And just seeing kind of how he could get away with so much, I think made that desire for accountability shoot like an airstream into another.
Yes.
I think there was a particular timing about that.
There was a timing about that.
Which is really interesting.
Yes, that's very interesting. And I suspect we'll see a lot more of that going forward. And using that as a foundational body of knowledge has to impact the future projects that are already in development for you in terms of women and strong, audacious, courageous women in the West? I mean, let's just call it what it is. Women who went out to the West and they were on their own had to be stronger than anyone else.
I mean, those frontier women's stories, like you said, we don't even know the tip of the iceberg. It's just unexamined, and there's not a lot of historical documents or writing or journals. We don't have our Lewis and Clark lady telling us how her life on the homestead was, raising 9 kids and holding down the fort when her partner went off to war. So I think, again, that's one of our strengths, is the imagination and our intuition, and kind of as we talked about yesterday or last week, the shoulders we stand on. We have to imagine through our own femininity what that experience was like, and then also do as much research as we can and kind of unearth these stories. And that's kind of beautiful in a way, you know, there's an alchemy to that, because you're not just doing research on the nose or just taking black and white facts. And there's a whole I don't even know how you describe it, just a leap of faith around the generations, and trusting that in your bones and kind of in your fiber.
Right. I'm curious, because you and I both live in very Western areas with a lot of land space, ranching, farming, etc. And I know we have here in New Mexico, as I'm sure you do in Montana, many women who are right at that 100-year mark. I'm curious if you have pursued conversations and interviews with these women to help you to formulate a stronger image of what it was for them back in that era.
I haven't, but I think that's so important. Kind of lit a fire under my butt over here. I know a woman who I think is 112. She's one of the oldest living women in the United States, and maybe the world. She lives over just a 2-minute walk near my mom. My mom always talks about her and her stories, and she was a school teacher and just has these really lovely, simple stories about the land and animals, and just her perceptions that aren't heavy-handed. They aren't terribly dramatic, but there's such a wisdom to them, and such a guide to how to live my life, if I'm talking about myself, and create my value system. So I don't know if she'd be open to talking to me, but I do worry about losing that generation's stories, and I do want to kind of get in there with my curiosity. So maybe in a couple of weeks I can report back differently.
Great. Yes. Go have tea.
Yeah. I'd love to go have tea.
Yes. I know you spoke of having discovered this sense of the Western landscape and its stories and its history and its hidden mysteries becoming your muse.
Yes. And a lot of that is in my childhood self. It's the smell of rain on a very dry prairie when you smell sage and sweetgrass. It's hearing meadowlarks, which I haven't heard for so long. They have just this really melodious sound to them that just reminds me of my childhood, because I grew up on the plains in Great Falls, Montana. It's returning to, I think, the child within, after experiencing the world so much and traveling and searching and trying to, figure things out, but to say, oh, maybe those things were always in me. Maybe I just need to trust the body's sense of this life that we're in. And a lot of that comes through the senses. And so to return to the land and to return to my senses, that has been a return to self, because I think in the city you have to shut off a lot of your senses because you're smelling horrible things in the subway and you're seeing things that can be very disturbing, and just seen so many awful things in the subway, which is kind of part of New York's charm, by the way.
Right.
But
it is.
yeah, which I love that grittiness, and it's just a 180 from here. But for me, for this part in my life, I wanted to return to opening up my senses and to taking nature and to allowing stories to kind of come through myself in that way.
Right. So going forward, and when I say going forward, emerging from COVID, we got sent to our rooms for a year to consider what we'd been doing. Emerging from COVID and then emerging into this new experience of yourself as a filmmaker and an actress, and working with the land and with the BIPOC people of the West.
Mm-hmm.
What are the two big things that you see on your horizon that you are chasing and committed to bringing to life at this point?
It's a really good question. I think it's just in the making. The first thing would be to make a TV series, which is very ambitious. So we have 10 episodes for 30 minutes, and to continue the work there of examining privilege and our own awkwardness, and to lean into the comedy. And I've done a lot of serious dramatic things, and the comedy is very delicious right now, but also gives us permission to kind of go into some touchy things that I don't think I could deliver with drama right now. And then also the pandemic made me want to watch comedy more. You don't really want to watch things that are so heavy because everyone's experiencing that. So I found myself really drawn to absurdist comedy and really cheeky kind of satires and social commentaries, and that felt really good. So I think that shifted the way into story for me. So I just want to, number one, complete a series. And number two, I just want to keep showing up on sets and keep building up community as a whole in Montana. I want to learn from everybody. I want to, learn from the stories where we are revisiting a lot of old tropes. I want to remain open to, I think, what anyone really has to say, because there's always a learning curve, whether it's saying yes to something,
that's the truth,
or no to something that I'm seeing. And the no's are very important, because if you can't say no, what is your yes worth? So I think by showing up for both, it sharpens your own integrity, which only you can define. So yeah, I want to content create and say what I have to say, but also be a fly on the wall and learn.
That's wonderful. And I really appreciate your approach to addressing privilege and bringing humor into it. Everything is very serious now, and it really, truly is serious. It has merit. The seriousness has merit. But I see a space of potential where if white women can start seeing images of just how ridiculous we can be with our privilege, that, sometimes that's able to seep in through the cracks a little bit more easily than the heavier, or certainly more so than the dogmatic.
Absolutely. The humor kind of breaks you open to let in the more serious stuff. So if we can have a good laugh at ourselves, we're more open to receive.
Absolutely. I could see myself or other women watching that, laughing, and then the following week catching ourselves and being able to laugh again and then it sticks and behavior changes and the conversation changes and everything moves forward in a different way.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I applaud you for taking that approach.
It takes a lot of courage and a lot of humility to be the clown, but I think the clown is beautiful though, and it's so fun to express. And we all have different clowns within us.
Yes. I enjoy playing the clown. I actually find it more comfortable very often. So maybe that's one of my hiding places. I hide behind the cloud, but that's okay. That works.
Yeah.
As far as women on the whole, as we get ready to wrap up here, as far as women on the whole, first in film and all levels of film, be it writing, production, whatever it is, performance, and then on beyond that to women who are being affected by film. What is your desire in terms of your personal impact?
I, of course, with the broad strokes, want to continue the interior feminine gaze through the work. We have a train and back.
I was just hearing that. You've got to love the West.
Yeah,
Only
I know.
in the West, even today in 2021, do you get the sound of a train going by in the background. But continue.
We live right by one, so it's going through all the time. And the tumbleweeds pass by through.
Right.
These are all, iconic.
A day in the life.
Yeah, exactly, that we live in. So there's that on a like a broader brush stroke, is just simply to revisit the Western landscape through the feminine gaze and allow, I think it's the theme of woman versus nature, not in conflict. A lot of Westerns are man versus nature, in conflict with nature. I think nature is a place of peace and comfort and muse and ability to console the soul, and instead making the battle within one's own complexity. So I'm interested in studying, I think, woman versus self, and have woman versus nature be a not in conflict, but a source of strength. So that's naturally playing out in my films. And just complexity. I just love complexity. I love someone who appears to be one way, but is actually quite different. And I think because we're in such a polarizing time that feels so black and white, the more we can have gray area discussions, the more we can explore character from a gray area point of view. I do think we're moving in the right direction towards having two things in the room without, having to go to their corners.
Yes.
Which is very much the experience of right now. So I want to continue to kind of be trained. Kind of
rather poetic. We're talking about the West, and here comes the train.
But just to, we talked about the tension of the opposites. I want to continue to be able to host that in my body and be an example to that, because it takes great strength to do that. And I want to inspire others to know that they can hold two things at once without completely losing it, because it can feel crazy at times.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective, because I believe we are polarized, because that is what, I don't know if we've lost it. I suspect, as I look back over just my 60 plus years, that we never fully embraced it. This understanding of the complexity of life, and particularly women. We balance so much. So I look forward to seeing what you bring out and what you share in terms of helping us recognize and feel seen and feel heard in our complex, or as I call us, multi-dimensional selves.
Thank you, Leslie. It's my journey as an individual. So to be able to share that with a larger audience is really a calling, and
Yes.
we're connected. So thank you for the opportunity to have that today with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Only as we see another presenting more than what we've had the comfort to present do we start giving ourselves permission
Yes,
to discover more.
exactly.
Jenna, this has been a delight.
Thank
Thank you so much. Now, for the audience, I want you to know all these films that we have discussed, Jenna's contact information, this is all going to be in her program notes. So subscribe, comment, read the program notes, visit her URLs, watch her film, and watch for the upcoming films. I am so pleased that you joined us today, and thank you, Jenna, for joining us. As I close, I trust that each one of you did gain nuggets, that each one of you felt a little bit more seen, a little bit more recognized. And I'd just like to remind you, you are stronger and you are wiser than you know.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you received inspiration for expanding your own social innovation and influence. Help us inspire others by sharing this episode and leaving your comments over at lesliemichaels.com/podcast. For more tips, insights, and support in creating a fully audacious, professional, and personal lifestyle you love, visit our Women We Should Know community on Facebook.